Have you ever noticed how the people who drain you the most are often the ones you keep letting back in? Like rust eating away at strong metal, the damage they cause isn't always sudden or explosive. It creeps in quietly, slow and silent, but relentless. You don't see it right away, but one day you realize the parts of you that used to feel strongest, your patience, your peace, your resilience, have become fragile under the weight of their presence. They expect you to always respond, always be available, always hand over your emotional energy like it's an endless supply. And for a while you do, because it seems easier than confrontation, because you want to keep the peace, because you're hoping they'll change. But they don't, because their power over you only exists as long as you keep granting them access. But something shifts the moment you stop feeding into their game. Their grip starts to slip. The invisible strings they tug at become weaker, and suddenly, their presence begins to lose its weight. Imagine a pair of old shoes you've walked in for years. Comfortable, reliable, trusted to carry you. Then one day, the stitching tears mid-journey, and every step becomes painful. That's what it feels like when the people you've relied on begin to hurt you. And just like those shoes, the truth is that they were wearing down for a long time, you just didn't notice. Or picture an elephant, quiet, calm, a symbol of unshakable strength. It doesn't need to roar or thrash to command respect. Its power lies in presence, in patience. And yet, the moment a threat arises, every smaller animal finds safety in its shadow. That's what real strength looks like. Not loud, not reactive, but powerful, rooted, and respected. The only way to protect that kind of inner strength is by setting boundaries before toxicity starts to corrode it. Because toxic people feed off access. They thrive on the proximity you grant them, on how close they are to your thoughts, your reactions, your personal life. So the first psychological boundary, the one that begins to starve their influence, is the boundary of limited access. This isn't about cutting someone off in a dramatic explosion. It's not about announcing that you're done or throwing up walls out of spite. It's about recognizing that not everyone deserves front row seats to your life. Some people should stay in the balcony, far enough that their noise can't reach your center. Toxic individuals burn brighter the more oxygen you give them. Every moment of your time, every explanation, every emotional engagement you offer, it fuels them. But start limiting that and you'll see something shift. Keep your conversations short. Stop oversharing. Pull back the energy you used to freely give. Their control weakens not because they've changed, but because you have. Stoic wisdom teaches us this through the words of Seneca. Associate only with those who make you better. It's not cold. It's clarity. Your peace, your energy, your growth, these are sacred. A friend of mine once dealt with a coworker who perfectly embodied the definition of toxicity. Always stirring drama, gossiping, spreading negativity like a virus in the air. At first, he engaged, thinking he was being polite. But every conversation left him mentally exhausted. Eventually, he stopped lingering near the desk, gave short, polite replies, declined unnecessary hangouts, and something magical happened. The coworker moved on. No fight, no fallout, just space, silence, freedom. When you limit access, you're not being unkind, you're being strategic. You're choosing peace over participation. You're saying, I value my time too much to spend it on people who don't. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom, and it doesn't end there. Another critical boundary is emotional detachment. This is one of the most misunderstood and yet most powerful shields against toxic energy. Because toxic people feed on reaction. They want to know they can push your buttons. They live for your anger, your defensiveness, your need to explain or justify. But emotional detachment severs that supply. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to protect your peace. It's the choice to stay centered when they try to pull you into their storm. Marcus Aurelius once said, choose not to be harmed and you won't be. You can't always control what people say, but you can control whether you let it affect your inner state. I remember a woman, let's call her Jennifer, who had a relative that made snide remarks at every family gathering. Passive-aggressive jabs wrapped in fake politeness. For years, Jennifer argued back, always leaving emotionally wounded. Then one day she stopped reacting, just smiled, nodded, and changed the subject. The silence was uncomfortable at first, but it was effective. The jabs stopped, not because the relative suddenly became kind, but because Jennifer's reaction, the reward, was gone. Emotional detachment is not passivity. It's power. It's not weakness. It's wisdom. When you stop reacting, toxic people lose interest. They can't manipulate what they can't disturb. And that's how you win, not by outshouting them, but by outsmarting them. Selective sharing is another often overlooked boundary. In today's world, people share everything, from their goals to their struggles, from victories to heartbreaks, with anyone willing to listen. But not everyone deserves to know your business, especially toxic people, because your information becomes their ammunition. They might pretend to care when you're vulnerable, but behind your back, they twist it, weaponize it, use it against you. Sharing too much with someone who doesn't have your best interest is like handing a loaded weapon to someone with shaky hands. A man I once knew, David, was working on a business idea he was excited about. He shared the full concept with a colleague he thought was a friend. Weeks later, that same colleague pitched the idea to the boss as his own. David was stunned. But what hurt more than the betrayal was realizing that he had handed over the blueprint without a second thought. From that day on, he became far more intentional. Selective sharing isn't about being secretive. It's about protecting what matters. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, said, "Better to trip with the feet than with the tongue." Words, once released, cannot be taken back. And in the wrong hands, even innocent truths become dangerous. When you practice selective sharing, you maintain control over your narrative. Not everyone gets the full story. Some people don't even deserve the headline. Share in layers. Protect your progress. And remember, your vulnerability is a gift, not a currency. Give it only to those who've earned it. The next boundary isn't something visible like a locked door or block number. It's internal. The boundary of mental real estate. Just like your home has limited space, your mind does too. And yet, toxic people often rent space in your head for free, playing reruns of past arguments, future what-ifs, and imaginary conversations you wish you had. They occupy your thoughts, even in their absence. That's the kind of rent that costs your peace. Every time you replay what they said, every time you imagine what you could have said back, every time you anticipate the next attack, they win. Even if they're not around, their influence lingers because you've built a throne for them inside your mind. And that's where your true power lies. Not just in how you respond outwardly, but in how much space you allow them to occupy inwardly. Silence can be louder than any reply. Distance can be sharper than any confrontation. But it takes discipline, takes intention. Your energy is a limited resource. Would you give your last sip of water to someone who only ever made you thirstier? Then why give your energy to someone who only depletes you? Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That's exactly what happens when you keep toxic. Toxic people alive in your thoughts. They become puppeteers of your peace. Pull the strings out. Start being intentional about your thoughts. The next time their face or voice pops into your head, take a breath. Name the thought. Acknowledge it. Then redirect. Not with anger, not with avoidance, but with choice. This is your mind. You are the gatekeeper. You decide who stays. There's also a boundary that many struggle with, the boundary of no explanation. You don't owe everyone a reason, especially not people who are committed to misunderstanding you. One of the most subtle manipulations toxic people use is making you feel like you have to explain yourself. Your choices, your distance, your silence. But you don't. Growth doesn't require permission, and peace doesn't need approval. In fact, the more you try to explain, the deeper you get pulled into their web. Because explanations are invitations to debate. And toxic people thrive in debate. They twist your words, poke holes in your reasoning, gaslight your truth. But when you stop explaining, you stop engaging. You take the power back. A woman I knew, named Amina, had a friend who constantly drained her, always making her feel guilty for not being available enough, not texting back fast enough, not doing enough. For years, she explained, justified, over-apologized, until one day she stopped. She replied to a guilt-tripping message with just 3 words, "I needed space." No excuse, no story, just truth. And you know what happened? The friendship ended. But so did the anxiety, the resentment, the constant emotional negotiation. Amina didn't lose a friend. She lost a manipulator and gained herself. Remember, boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges to your peace, to your clarity, to your evolution. They say, "This is how I value myself." And if someone can't respect that, it says everything about them and nothing about you. There's also the sacred boundary of not rescuing people from their consequences. This one's hard, especially for the kind-hearted. You see someone making a mess of their life. You want to help. You want to fix. You want to save them from the fall. But sometimes the fall is the lesson. The pain is the teacher. And by cushioning it, you're actually delaying their growth. Toxic people are often experts at playing victim. They'll spin the story, play on your empathy, pull you into their chaos. And before you know it, you're fixing their problems while yours pile up. You're holding their weight while they walk lighter. But real compassion isn't rescuing someone from their consequences. It's allowing them to face them, to learn, to grow, to rise on their own. I once heard a story of a man who always bailed his brother out of financial messes. Every time the brother made a poor decision, another loan, another failed scheme, he would step in. Until one day he stopped. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. That year, the brother finally got a job, paid off debt, and started changing his habits. Why? Because he finally had to. People don't change when it's easy. They change when it's necessary. Let them feel the necessity. That's not abandonment. That's empowerment. And there's one more boundary that's essential to protect your energy. The boundary of celebration silence. Not everyone deserves to hear your dreams. Not everyone will clap when you rise. In fact, toxic people often feel threatened by your growth. They'll downplay your success, plant seeds of doubt, or try to compete when you're just trying to share. Protect your joy. Share it with those who amplify it, not those who dim it. You're allowed to be excited quietly, to succeed privately, to rise without announcing your every step. Sometimes the most powerful moves are the ones no one sees coming. A close friend of mine once told me she had a new job offer, something she had worked years for, but she didn't tell anyone until she signed the contract and finished her first day. Why? Because in the past, every time she shared something early, someone would insert fear. "Are you sure it's the right move? That's a big risk. I wouldn't do that if I were you." And that doubt would shake her. This time, she chose silence, and it gave her strength. Protecting your energy also means protecting your joy. You don't owe your dreams to anyone who doesn't know how to honor them. These boundaries, limited access, emotional detachment, mental real estate, no explanation, non-rescue, and silent celebration, aren't about becoming cold or distant. They're about becoming clear. Clear about your worth. Clear about your peace. Clear about who gets what version of you and why. They're acts of self-respect, of spiritual maturity, of love, not just for others, but for yourself. And when you honor these boundaries, something begins to shift. Your life becomes lighter. Your mind becomes quieter. Your relationships become healthier. And your energy finally returns to you. Not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone gets to walk through the sacred temple of your presence. So stand at the gates, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with wisdom. Smile gently, speak kindly, and guard your peace like it's the rarest treasure in the world. Because it is, and you are. There's a moment when you realize that peace isn't just found in silence. It's found in selection. The selection of who you allow to reach you, speak to you, affect you. The moment you become intentional about your energy, life starts to change. That doesn't mean you become heartless. It means you become whole. And being whole means you stop bleeding for those who only ever gave you paper cuts. There is a powerful shift that happens when you stop trying to fix broken people who don't want to be fixed. You start fixing the broken parts of yourself that allowed them to stay for so long. You see, many of us are taught that love means giving endlessly, forgiving constantly, showing up even when we're being drained. But love, in its truest form, doesn't destroy you. It doesn't ask you to abandon yourself to prove your worth. That's not love. That's self-neglect wrapped in a false idea of loyalty. Real love holds space. Real love listens. Real love respects. And when someone can't meet you there, it's not your job to lower yourself. It's your job to rise. There's a saying in Eastern philosophy, a person drowning cannot save another. And yet we try. We stretch ourselves thin for people who wouldn't lift a finger for us. We justify toxic behavior because we think we're being compassionate. But compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. You cannot save someone who is committed to their own chaos. You can only save yourself from being pulled into it. And this is where your growth begins. Not in the loud declarations of cutting people off, but in the quiet decisions of reclaiming your life. No dramatic goodbyes. No harsh confrontations. Just a steady removal of your energy from spaces that don't deserve it. A gentle closing of doors that once led to pain. A silent unfollowing, not just online, but in your mind, your heart, your spirit. Think about the conversations you replay over and over. The ones where you said too much or not enough. The moments where someone made you feel small, and you walked away carrying their projection like it was your truth. Those tapes play on repeat, and they drain your power. But here's the truth. You don't need closure from someone who benefits from your confusion. You don't need validation from someone who thrives on your insecurity. Sometimes the most powerful closure is deciding you're done needing theirs. And you know what happens when you stop chasing closure? You create space. Space for new energy. Space for joy. Space for people who meet you with clarity, not chaos. Who see you not through the lens of their wounds, but through the light of your truth. You begin to attract what you reflect. And when your boundaries are rooted in self-love, what comes to you is love in return. But let's talk about something most people avoid. Guilt. The guilt of saying no. The guilt of pulling away. The guilt of protecting yourself. Creeps in quietly, especially when you've been conditioned to prioritize others above yourself. Toxic people will weaponize that guilt. They'll call you selfish, cold, uncaring. But here's what they won't tell you. Your boundaries are only a problem for those who benefited from you having none. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace. You don't owe anyone your energy just because they're used to receiving it. You are allowed to evolve, to outgrow dynamics that no longer align, to redefine what access looks like. And yes, some people will fall away, but let them exit with grace, even if they do it with noise. Your peace doesn't require their approval. Only your permission. This journey, the one you're on right now, it's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world convinced you to be small. Before the trauma. Before the conditioning. Before the lies that made you believe you had to shrink to be loved. Your power isn't in how loudly you defend yourself. It's in how silently you rise. How peacefully you protect. How gracefully you release. There's strength in quiet decisions. In walking away without bitterness, in choosing solitude over fake companionship, in spending time with yourself and realizing your own presence is enough. Some of the most sacred healing doesn't happen in therapy rooms or retreats. It happens in your bedroom, in the stillness of your soul when you finally say, I deserve better, and actually believe it. And that belief changes everything. You start showing up differently. You stop begging for love. You stop explaining your worth. You stop settling for crumbs when you were born to feast. You become magnetic, not because you're trying to be, but because your energy speaks before you do. Because people can feel when someone has done the work. When someone has faced their shadows, loved their wounds, and emerged with wisdom in their eyes. You stop fearing loneliness because you realize solitude is sacred. And when you no longer fear being alone, you stop tolerating people who make you feel lonelier than silence ever could. You begin to understand that energy is currency, and you stop spending it on things that don't grow you, nourish you, or honor you. You no longer explain your decisions. You embody them. You no longer seek revenge. You elevate. You no longer react. You respond with clarity, with purpose, with presence. Because peace isn't passive. It's powerful. It's a daily choice. And every time you choose it, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was once lost in the noise of other people's expectations. So here you are, standing at the threshold of your becoming. You've seen the damage of leaking energy. You've felt the ache of giving too much. And now you're choosing different. Not from a place of bitterness, but from a place of wisdom. Because now you know, not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone can handle the weight of your light. And that's okay. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to honor yourself, to walk with intention, to love with discernment, to protect your peace like it's the most sacred thing you own. Because it is. There's something profoundly freeing about learning to say no. Not just the word itself, but what it stands for. No to chaos. No to disrespect. No to the stories you've outgrown. Each no becomes a yes to yourself, a reclaiming of your time, your peace, your purpose. You start realizing that not every phone call needs to be answered. Not every message deserves a reply. Not every storm requires your attention. There is power in silence. Not the kind that suppresses, but the kind that protects. You start to see that boundaries are not walls. They are bridges to the version of you that no longer seeks survival but chooses sacredness. They don't shut the world out, they guide the right energy in. And for the first time in a long time, you stop feeling guilty for not giving access to those who've only ever brought noise. You feel lighter, more grounded, because your soul is no longer being tugged in directions that dilute your spirit. And yes, some people will misunderstand this version of you. They'll say you've changed, and they'll be right, because you have. You've stopped prioritizing validation. You've stopped dimming your light just to keep others comfortable. You've stopped holding onto connections that were only built on your willingness to tolerate. What once felt like loyalty now feels like self-abandonment. And you're done with that. You begin to realize that healing isn't just about mending what was broken. It's about no longer attracting what broke you. It's not about going back to who you were. It's about becoming someone who no longer settles for anything less than peace. Healing teaches you how to recognize your own red flags. The people-pleasing, the over-explaining, the fear of being alone. And one by one, you release them. You stop chasing people who never chose you. You stop overextending for those who would never stretch for you. You stop waiting for someone to finally appreciate your worth because now you see it yourself. You stand taller, speak softer, and listen deeper to your intuition, your truth, your calling. Because somewhere along the journey, you've remembered, you are not here to be everything for everyone. You are here to be something sacred for yourself. And as you rise into that awareness, life begins to mirror your energy. The more you honor your space, the more it fills with alignment. The more you release what doesn't serve, the more room there is for what nourishes. Your circle gets smaller, but your connections get deeper. Your schedule gets quieter, but your soul gets louder. You no longer crave attention. You crave intention, presence, truth. People used to confuse your kindness for weakness, but now your kindness comes with edges. Not sharp ones, but sacred ones. You give from overflow, not emptiness. You love from wholeness, not lack. You show up fully, but not at the cost of your sanity. Because now you understand that peace is not found in avoiding discomfort. It's found in facing what hurts and choosing not to bleed for it anymore. You stop seeking revenge or closure. You start seeking release. You realize that revenge keeps you bound to the wound, but release sets you free. You stop trying to be understood by those who never listened. You stop needing apologies from people who still lie to themselves. You let it all go, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer controls you. Forgiveness becomes your revolution, not the kind that invites people back into your life, but the kind that clears them from your nervous system. You feel the weight of unspoken words lift. You feel your shoulders relax, your jaw soften, your breath deepen, because carrying pain became too expensive. And peace became the new standard. You learn to forgive yourself too, for not knowing better, for staying too long, for loving too hard, for trying to save people who were never ready. You give yourself grace. You realize that your softness was never a flaw, it was your superpower. But now it's guarded, not by bitterness, but by boundaries, firm, quiet, unshakable. And suddenly, love looks different. It's no longer intensity or chaos. It's consistency, it's safety, it's mutual respect. You don't crave butterflies anymore. You crave calm, stability, someone who brings peace, not storms. You're no longer seduced by potential. You're anchored in reality, because you've learned that love without presence is empty. That charm without is manipulation. That connection without effort is just convenience. Now you speak your truth without trembling. You ask for what you need without apologizing. You walk away without guilt. You love yourself without conditions. And in doing so, you give others permission to do the same. The world feels different, not because it changed, but because you did. You stopped living on autopilot. You started choosing, deliberately, courageously, softly. You wake up each day and ask, what feeds my soul? What drains it? Who brings me closer to myself? Who pulls me away? And you adjust accordingly, not from fear, but from clarity. You are no longer impressed by loudness. You seek quiet power. You are no longer moved by flattery. You listen for consistency. You are no longer driven by urgency. You move with intention. This is growth. This is healing. This is alignment. And above all, this is freedom. The freedom to no longer beg for love, to no longer explain your boundaries, to no longer carry what isn't yours, to be who you are without apology, without permission, without fear. You are not the same, and you're not supposed to be. This version of you, rooted, radiant, resilient, is who you were always meant to become. There's a subtle shift that happens when you begin to honor your energy. You stop seeking chaos and start craving quiet. You're no longer addicted to being needed. You start savoring solitude, not as loneliness but as liberation. The silence that once scared you becomes sacred. It becomes the space where you finally hear your own voice again. The voice that had been drowned out by obligations, noise, and all the ways you once bent to fit into places you'd long outgrown. You start to understand that your peace is your power, not the kind that dominates a room, but the kind that walks in without needing to prove anything. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. The kind that radiates from a soul that no longer chases, no longer begs, no longer explains. Because there's nothing left to prove when you've already made peace with who you are. And this is where life begins to bloom in unexpected ways. Opportunities start arriving, not because you were desperate, but because you were aligned. People begin to treat you differently, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. Your energy introduces you before your words do. And now your energy says, I am enough. I am whole. I am not here to entertain what drains me. You stop running toward love that hides, and you stop clinging to people who show you their absence more than their presence. You learn that not everyone is meant to understand your journey, and that's okay. Some people were only meant to walk beside the older version of you. And as you evolve, their roles expire not out of malice, but out of mismatch. You bless their part in your story, and you move forward, not bitter, but wiser, not hardened, but softer in the right places. Because growth doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop leaking. You stop pouring into cups with holes. You stop offering your light to those who live in shadows by choice. You let people go, not because you didn't care, but because you finally started caring about yourself. And in this space of stillness, something sacred unfolds. You begin to meet yourself again. Not the version the world trained you to be, but the version your soul always knew. The one who feels deeply, who laughs loudly, who loves without armor but with discernment, who trusts their intuition, who doesn't shrink to fit into boxes but expands to hold the truth of their becoming. This version of you is magnetic, not because of aesthetics, but because of authenticity. You don't perform anymore. You just are. You don't seek approval. You honor alignment. You don't chase connections. You attract resonance. And the more you live this way, the more life feels like yours again. Not borrowed, not reactive, but rooted. You stop saying yes to things that insult your soul. You stop engaging in conversations that drain your spirit. You stop pretending to be okay when you're not. You start honoring the ebb and the flow, the rise and the rest, the clarity and the confusion. Because you're no longer afraid of your own humanity. You're no longer trying to hide your wounds. You're healing them with grace, with patience, with self-compassion. And you notice how the universe responds to this shift. The people who remain are the ones who see you, not just the curated version, but the real you. The one who cries sometimes. The one who gets triggered. The one who's still learning, still trying, still growing. And that's enough. That's more than enough. The right people don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be present, to be honest, to be real. And as you show up in your wholeness, you realize something beautiful. You were never too much. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't hold your depth. You were never too sensitive. You were just trying to feel in a world that numbs. You were never too soft. You were simply made of something sacred. So you start walking through life differently. You lead with presence. You listen more. You react less. You choose peace over proving. You choose truth over comfort. You choose yourself not from ego, but from embodiment. Because self-love is not selfish. The spiritual is how you return to your center when the world tries to pull you away. You start to see that everything that left you was clearing space. That every no was protection. That every ending was redirection. That every breakdown was breaking you open to more truth, more clarity, more alignment. You're no longer in a rush. You trust divine timing. You're no longer searching. You're attracting. You're no longer surviving. You're rising. This is the quiet revolution of the soul. The kind that doesn't need applause to be powerful. The kind that unfolds in private moments. In your morning breath, your silent prayers, your choice to pause instead of lash out, your decision to rest instead of hustle. It's not flashy, but it's real, and it's sacred. And now, when people meet you, they feel something different. They can't quite name it, but it's there. In your presence, in your energy, in your boundaries, in your joy. It's not confidence. It's embodiment. You don't just speak wisdom. You live it. You don't just know your worth. You act on it. Because this calm, this clarity, this compassion is who you've always been, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the need to be everything for everyone. You've returned, and you're not apologizing for it. Not anymore. And now you see it clearly. No one enters your life by chance. Not the ones who stayed. Not the ones who left. Not even the ones who broke you. Each one arrived with a lesson. Some to teach you how to love, others to teach you how to let go. Some to remind you of your strength, others to reveal where you had abandoned yourself. They were never random. They were never mistakes. They were mirrors, reflecting parts of you that were either forgotten, neglected, or ready to rise. You begin to look back, not with regret, but with reverence. That painful friendship taught you boundaries. That silent heartbreak taught you presence. That one-sided love taught you self-worth. Every connection, fleeting or enduring, was part of your soul's unfolding. Each encounter, each goodbye, shaped the path you walk now. And as you walk it more awake, more aware, you begin to walk it with grace. This is where healing becomes holy, when you no longer need to rewrite the past, only to read it differently, with kinder eyes, with a wiser heart. You understand that closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a quiet decision. A decision to stop opening the door to pain, to stop bleeding for what no longer feeds you, to stop searching for apologies in places where silence has already spoken. You accept that not everyone will. Understand your growth, that not everyone is meant to walk the whole path with you. Some people were simply the bridge, not the destination. And that's okay. You bless them, you release them, and you continue. Not hardened, but softer. Not bitter, but blooming. And from that place, something sacred begins to happen. Your relationships evolve. They become less about possession and more about presence. Less about need, more about mutual nourishment. You stop trying to force connections and start honoring alignment. You realize that the right people don't just want your highlight reel. They want your humanness. They want your stillness, your laughter, your silence, your soul. They meet you where you are and walk beside you. Not ahead, not behind, but with you. And when they don't, you no longer chase. You no longer convince. You no longer contort yourself to be chosen. Because now you choose you. This is the awakening, the realization that you are the home you've been seeking in others. That your peace isn't found in someone else's validation, but in your own presence. That your worth is not measured by how many people stay, but by how true you remain to yourself when they go. You see now that love isn't something to beg for, it's something to embody. That peace isn't something to find, it's something to allow. That forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. You stop blaming others for your pain and start reclaiming your power. Because healing isn't about changing them, it's about changing how you relate to what hurt you. This is the path. Not always easy, not always clear, but always sacred. Walk it with tenderness, with awareness, with presence. And remember, your story is unfolding exactly as it's meant to. Trust it, honor it, live it fully, and never forget, you are not alone. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are becoming. And that is more than enough.